And so, with that kind of technology, you don't really need someone like Epstein anymore. Someone like Epstein becomes expendable because you can use technology for that. And I argue in the book that Peter Thiel's Palantir was basically a repurposing of this DARPA program called Total Information Awareness. Who does Mossad work for? So we have to go a level up if we really want to know what's going on, and look beyond CIA and Mossad and see, who's really, at least at the scale up, a key part of the power structure that's really running the show, because, it's important for them that the public doesn't really look that high up.
For decades, we've been told that Silicon Valley's giants like Google, Facebook, and Amazon were built by brilliant entrepreneurs fueled by innovation and competition. But what if that narrative isn't the whole truth? What if these tech empires were never truly independent, but instead extensions of an older power structure? One that manipulates economies, controls narratives, and tightens its grip on the digital world. Investigative journalist Whitney Webb has spent years uncovering the connections between intelligence agencies, organized crime, and the rise of big tech. In today's video, she reveals how Silicon Valley wasn't just about technology. Many of its top companies were seeded with funding from entities like the CIA and DARPA, aiming to create systems of control. This isn't just about surveillance or corporate monopolies. It's about a hidden network of power shaping the world, often in ways people don't realize. From Google and Facebook's early days to tech moguls' ties with figures like Jeffrey Epstein, intelligence agencies' influence is everywhere. Whitney argues that what we've been sold as innovation is actually a digital ecosystem serving a powerful ruling class. The illusion of freedom is crumbling as we enter a world dominated by AI, digital IDs, and cashless economies. Watch Whitney's explosive interview with Kim Iversen to uncover the disturbing truth. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insights. Enjoy the video.
I mean, basically, at the end of the day, these entities and this power structure have been successful because people have not really been aware of what's been going on and how interconnected a lot of these oligarch networks ultimately are, and how connected they are to our national security state. Because a lot of people, if we're just talking about, back to my point earlier, talking about Mossad, talking about the CIA. Who does the CIA work for? Who does Mossad work for? In the case of the CIA, it's very clear that it was created by Wall Street bankers who entered into questionable alliances with organized crime, and bankers and organized crime are both ultimately interested in expanding their rackets and is making as much money as possible. And so eventually you have certain economic networks, and these alliances dominated what is now corporate America, the multinational corporation. That's who the CIA has, throughout most of its history, conducted coups on behalf of. So we have to go a level up if we really want to know what's going on, and look beyond CIA and Mossad and see, who's really, at least at the scale up, a key part of the power structure that's really running the show, because, it's important for them that the public doesn't really look that high up, because then it just seems like we can't really do anything about it. But I think people ultimately can. And what I've argued a lot for a long time is that, people need to try and extricate themselves, from, the biggest iteration of what this mob is today, which is really big tech, which is, again, a lot of these CEOs connected to figures like Epstein or other questionable associations. And also almost all of the big Silicon Valley companies today have origins or funding tied to the CIA or to DARPA or to entities like that. And that we should boycott them as much as possible and not use their services as much as possible and not be dependent on these entities, because if we're dependent, then, they can do whatever they want to us.
Yeah.
And so, the best way to not give up is to work to be as independent of those systems as possible. Because if we're dependent on them, you're basically a slave to these people at the end of the day, which is what I think most Americans do not want. But I think there's a lot of efforts being made to sort of keep people in the box of where they think, oh, well, if I vote for this party or this politician and this candidate, I don't have to do anything to ensure my independence from the system. I can remain dependent on the system and hope that politician XYZ will magically save the day and fix the country and end this ruling power of the 80 plus years of intelligence and organized crime. Yeah, I think it's really something that has to be sort of done on an individual level, and people need to take individual responsibility if they don't want to be part of the system, particularly as we move into this increasingly digital future that these very small handful of companies are going to completely control.
Whitney Webb's revelations reveal the alarming convergence of technology, intelligence agencies, and corporate power into an all-encompassing system of control. The tech giants billions depend on aren't just businesses, they're tools for influence, surveillance, and manipulation. From online information to personal data, everything is monitored and shaped by unseen forces. This is more than just privacy violations. It's a deliberate erosion of personal autonomy. As digital IDs, CBDCs, and AI-driven governance gain ground, opting out will soon be impossible. The system makes us dependent on cloud services, social media, and centralized digital finance. And governments and corporations no longer need force. They control the infrastructure. The most insidious part, it's all disguised as convenience. Every new tech advancement deepens our dependence, and the real danger is how little resistance exists. Most don't question these power structures because they've been conditioned to view them as separate, not as a unified machine. This is how control is maintained, by keeping the public unaware and dependent.
Connected to my work on Epstein, and in my book, One Nation Under Blackmail, I basically conclude with the point that someone like Epstein is no longer really relevant for intelligence services or organized crime networks or oligarch networks in the age of technology. And why is that? So back in the day, you have Epstein and a litany of other figures like him, which I detail figures in my book. He was obviously not an anomaly at all. But that type of sexual blackmail operation comes with a lot of risk. It takes a lot of money to finance, the person who's running it, their mansion, their parties, paying off women, all of these money flows. It can be risky. And it certainly ended up being that in the Epstein case, right? Because he was he was discovered, arrested twice, and it obviously took a lot of money to cover things up, at least the first time and arguably the second time as well, where he ended up dead. So what's a better alternative? Well, if you have everyone onboarded onto digital systems that you control, like the CIA being at the origins of Google, DARPA being at the origins of Facebook, the CIA being at the origins of Oracle, and a lot of these other entities, Bill Gates and Microsoft having ties to the Maxwell family as early as the late 90s and things like that. And obviously Gates and Epstein, what does that ultimately mean? Like, I think, at this point in time, we've learned through either whistleblowers or other means that intelligence agencies access or can access pretty much any part of our digital footprint, no matter how secure we tend to think it is. And that's like with revelations about, ostensibly secure messaging apps like Signal being compromised or having had some sort of military funding in its origins or what have you. It's much easier to suck up all of Americans' communications without a warrant, and that necessarily is in the hands of a lot of these same agencies with dubious track records that have engaged in blackmail in the past, like the CIA, for example. And so, with that kind of technology, you don't really need someone like Epstein anymore. Someone like Epstein becomes expendable because you can use technology for that. And I argue in the book that Peter Thiel's Palantir was basically a repurposing of this DARPA program called Total Information Awareness that was developed by the Iran-Contra criminal who was exonerated by William Barr when he covered Iran-Contra and other notable scandals of the era up in the first Bush administration. Poindexter's considered the father of modern surveillance, and it was basically he was running this total information awareness program. Peter Thiel and Alex Karp came to him, being connected through Richard Pearl, who has longstanding ties to the state of Israel and also the U.S. neoconservative movement, and also Netanyahu. Basically, bringing those together, looking for a way to privatize total information awareness after it came under congressional scrutiny and was ultimately defunded by Congress because of private outrage that it would eliminate the constitutional right to privacy for all Americans, which is absolutely true. But the outrage disappeared when it was entirely a private company, and Palantir was incubated by the CIA. The CIA was its first customer for its several years. It was a client, and now it's a key part of, IDF AI mass slaughter in Gaza, and has been a key part of the U.S.-Israel relationship since then. But more specifically, domestically in the U.S., it is the engine on which the warrantless mass surveillance runs. It collects everything about everyone and makes it disposable to intelligence agencies, and it's very easy to find blackmail on people with an entity like Palantir being so widely used.
Whitney Webb's revelations make one thing unmistakably clear. The mechanisms of power have evolved. What once required secretive, risky operations now flows effortlessly through digital infrastructure. Gone are the days of figures like Jeffrey Epstein, where blackmail was carried out through physical entrapment. Now control operates through a far more efficient and covert system. Surveillance is no longer just a tool, it's the backbone of governance. Intelligence agencies, once bound by legal oversight, now access personal data from billions of people under the guise of national security. With technologies like Palantir, they no longer need to set up complex traps. Everything from financial transactions to communications and location data is already collected, analyzed, and, when necessary, weaponized. This is the true danger of big tech's collaboration with intelligence agencies. The same platforms we rely on for communication, work, and entertainment are now the tools of modern coercion. They not only enable blackmail, but also allow for mass behavioral manipulation. The power to censor, deplatform, and rewrite history in real time is now centralized in the hands of a few interconnected entities. This isn't conspiracy, it's well documented, and their reach keeps expanding. Yet the most significant threat isn't their power, it's our dependence on their systems. If we rely on them for news, money, work, or social interaction, stepping out of line could lead to digital disappearance. In an increasingly digital world, that's just as effective as physical removal. So where does that leave us? The comforting lie that politicians or elections will fix this is just that, a lie. True resistance comes from building independence, recognizing the trap, and stepping away from the systems designed to keep us compliant. If we don't, the future won't just be one of mass surveillance. It will be a world where freedom exists only as an illusion, curated, controlled, and defined by the very people who created this system. Once this digital control structure is fully in place, there may be no way out. The truth is clear, but we must be willing to see it. If this video has opened your eyes to the deep connections between big tech, intelligence agencies, and the systems governing our lives, like, comment, and subscribe to stay informed. Don't let this conversation end here. Share this video and help others uncover the truth. Most importantly, take action. Question the platforms you use, seek out independent alternatives, and protect your privacy. The future isn't written, but if we don't push back now, it will be written for us. Thanks for watching.